finish each workshop, we're gonna put a link in the chat. So you're gonna evaluate and you're gonna tell us how we can improve this workshop, okay? So yes or yes, please fill out that survey. So sí o sí vamos a comenzar ahora con el taller de justicia alimentaria, después el de jardinería, y entre medio de los talleres vamos a compartir un link, un enlace en el chat para que ustedes puedan ayudarnos a evaluar los talleres y saber qué cosas podemos hacer mejor y cómo podemos cambiarlas. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for 1 second. And Riley's gonna make the breakout room. The breakout room is ready. So you're gonna receive an invitation in your.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
For some reason, there is a
Hello.
timer on the breakout room. I'm going to let Riley know to change that. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for participating in our icebreaker and looking at some of the work that Kids Club is doing. Once again, all of you should know me. My name is Carlo. I'm the coordinating, help with coordination in time's up. Keep breakout rooms open. Sorry. I'm one of the coordinators here at La Mesa Verde. And so today we're going to be covering a couple of different topics. In our food justice portion, we're going to be talking specifically about pesticides and its impact on farmers, on our health, also on our environment. So we're going to be talking about that first. And then we're going to be moving on to our gardening workshop, which we're going to be talking about organic fertilizer that you can use in your garden and the process of starting your own worm composting bin. So we have a lot to learn today. If you need to take notes or take screenshots, please do so. We are also going to send this presentation and also the recording of this video and discussion to the link through email afterwards. So y'all will have access to this. So if I go a little bit fast, you'll be able to still review it later. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm gonna mute everyone real quick. Give me 1 second, actually. If you guys need to ask any questions, please raise your hand or put it into the chat, okay? That'll help the presentation move along a little bit more. And also, we won't be interrupting each other during this presentation. Okay. All right. Can everyone see this? Any thumbs up? Yeah, everyone can see the pesticides title? Okay, perfect. All right, everyone. Welcome to our food justice portion of the workshop. So today we're going to be talking about pesticides and basically the history of pesticides, as well as how it ended up being used in our current agricultural system, in our industrial farming system. So we'll go into those details a little bit more. All right, so just a real brief history on pesticide use. So actually, pesticide use has been something that's been going on for thousands of years, just in two different extents. One way pesticides ended up being used more often was because of the results of World War II. A lot of scientists actually developed chemical weapons to improve their efficiency in destruction. And a lot of those, a lot of those chemicals ended up being used in the agricultural field after the war. And then we moved on to the Green Revolution. This is when agriculture, especially in the United States, ended up getting industrialized, and larger machines were included in maintaining these fields to produce more food for the masses. And then Huh? Okay. Okay. All right. We'll switch you. Sorry. The Blue Revolution is something a little bit more recent. Oh, something a little bit more recent. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. I need to help someone move into a different room. I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. Let me see how I'm. Okay, Neela.
I think, sorry, I put her into the breakout room, but you might just need to go to her screen and click yes for her.
Neela, not joined. It's saying just not joined for her.
Yeah, I think maybe you need to go to her computer and click.
Oh, okay.
Move.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties, sorry. There we go. All good. He's on his way back. Don't even worry.
I'm sorry about that, everyone. One of our members was having issues joining the other room. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation.
Maybe yesterday it just said
Oh. 1 second, I can hear someone. Okay, so going back to the presentation, we're talking about the brief history. So moving on a little bit after the Green Revolution, we were talking about the Blue Revolution, which is when scientists started developing genetically modified seeds or crops that could resist chemicals and pesticides and herbicides. And so these are three distinct ways chemicals, specifically pesticides, started being used in the food production, especially here in the United States. So you have to think about how our agricultural system has changed since before the Industrial Revolution. So we basically have a capitalist agricultural system, and the main focus of agriculture right now in our country is to lower the amount of inputs that we put into it and maximize the outputs and profits that we gain from it. And so, deep within this complex system of agriculture, there are specific crops that we favor. Crop rotation isn't as implemented, and a lot of chemical and mechanical inputs are used instead. And a lot is really put on the scale of production, and we have to produce a ton in order to keep the prices of produce really low and competitive in the market. You also cut down on labor costs and also when the crops are actually sold. So, these are priorities really for farmers to produce as much of the product as possible, offering it as cheap as possible. That way they can sell the most and make the most profit. And unfortunately, with this practice, the use of chemicals and mechanical inputs really depletes the soil because of monocropping, which is growing the same crop throughout the entire farm, and then insufficient crop rotation. So they do not switch their crops often enough to make sure that there isn't any nutrient deficiencies in their soil. Because if you continue to grow the same crops over and over again, there will be nutrient deficiencies. So they compensate that by adding chemical fertilizers and using chemical pesticides. So we will move on. So we have to talk about the typical farmer's dependency on pesticides. So I touched on it a little bit earlier, but The agricultural market, the produce market is actually very competitive, and a lot of farmers have to rely on pesticides in order to keep up with the competition, and also making sure they can produce the most um, and sell at the lowest price possible, because there is a lot of competition when it comes to agriculture, and conventional farmers have to really stick to using chemical fertilizers and using chemical pesticides. So it's not as financially sound to switch to organic ways of avoiding pesticide use. And so, you have to think about farmers. This is their living. A lot of them are in debt and are really just trying to, one, make enough to live, and two, make enough to maintain the land that they're working on. And so we have to admit to ourselves the reality that farmers are doing this as a work. They are trying to figure out the cheapest and most effective way of getting this produce out there. And so to ask farmers who've been growing conventional produce through pesticide use to change into more organic ways of farming can be a little bit much, especially if it's not financially as promising. And also, we don't change anything when it comes to policy or ecological interventions that we could possibly do. So my question to all of you is, how do we intervene to transition farmers away from unsustainable practices that capitalist agriculture uh, practices towards more sustainable agriculture, not dependent on the pesticide treadmill, so the use of pesticides? If you have anything to say, we're going to have two people try answering this. You can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Oop. Unmute yourself or raise your hand, and we can talk about this just a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joel.
Well, I'm still thinking about it, but I think it's a really intriguing subject.
So how do you
I
think
guess I should.
how do you think we can support farmers to go away from unsustainable practices like pesticide use and go towards some more sustainable models? Oh, okay.
You have to encourage,
Go ahead, Joel.
make it hard for them not to, and harder for them to do the standard practices somehow.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like legal action, like a initiative or something. Initiatives to impede little by little impede the guys like Monsanto, and add more rights to the small farmers and family farmers
Mm-hmm.
and organic farmers, which I know is like you can't do it all at once because there's a huge resistance against it. I know.
Mm-hmm. But one idea also is to provide incentives for using practices that are a little bit more sustainable, like organic farming. Because right now there are really no incentives other than the label, and so they don't get as much of a break doing organic farming compared to conventional farming. So, all right, we're gonna move on, Joel. Nicole has her hand up. Nicole, would you like to say something?
Yes, hi. So I was thinking one way where we can start making little small impacts individually that can mount up would be to only buy organic produce as much as possible ourselves, and also to do what we're doing by being a part of this program and grow our own food organically and show our friends and neighbors how to do the same.
That's a really good point, Nicole. So we really need to start within ourselves, within our households, within our family and friends, because that's definitely the first step. It's still identifying, though, that unless we have significant policy change, especially, it's going to be harder for these farmers to actually change it. Especially, like I said earlier, financially, it doesn't make as much sense. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Thank you, Nicole. All right, so we are going to talk specifically about the effects of pesticides. So over the years, there have been studies done to document the effects of certain pesticides. Some very popular pesticides, for example, DDT was one that was legal for a really long time, and then it was found to really affect the environment and our health. So pesticides that are sprayed on crops usually leave a residue on dead plant material. It settles in the soil, and then that gets washed off into the waterways and leaks into our groundwater. So there are 38 states that found pesticides in the majority of the river streams.
Do you know how I can get it off the speaker though in this?
Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Oh, okay. They muted themselves. Okay. So they found it in rivers, streams, ditches, waste treatment plants, as well as 70% of rainfall samples. So that's pretty significant. Even levels of levels of what is considered safe with pesticides in our water system has caused a lot of loss when it comes to biodiversity, decreasing the amount of insects, birds, and amphibians in the environment, especially when it comes to species of pollinators for fruit, nut, and vegetable crops. So there are certain pesticides that affect the nervous system of insects that have been growing in popularity since the 1990s. And specifically because they're low toxicity to mammals and humans, but they have more of an effect when it comes to these pollinators. For in specific, I'm sure all of you have heard about the declining bee population in just globally in general. We're having more instances of colony collapse. A lot of bee farmers who lend their bees to agricultural practices, their colonies are just collapsing out of nowhere. And a lot of the suspicion when it comes to this is because of the the effect that these pesticides have on their nervous system, which prevents them from living longer, behaving normally, and maintaining their health in the longer term. So they saw that queens are actually, who are exposed to these pesticides, produce less eggs for queens and also for their individual colonies. So it really impairs specifically their ability to learn and communicate with each other. So that's a little bit on pesticides on our environment. So the main people who tend to be the most exposed are farm workers. Often farm workers aren't given the required protective equipment, or they're forced to work in fields that have been recently sprayed with pesticides that hasn't been absorbed yet. A lot of these workers are immigrants with limited English skills, so they may not be trained or able to understand the warnings when it comes to pesticides, and may even be pressured into working in unsafe conditions. Oh, sorry. So specifically what public health says is pesticide use has been linked to lower birth weight, abnormal brain development, and increased instances of cancer and reduced fertility among people who work in agricultural areas. And when I say agricultural areas, think of Central Valley, the green areas in California. You need to think of those areas in particular. Even legal pesticides can have carcinogens, and these are related to numerous types of cancer, including brain, pancreatic, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, myeloma, colon, testicular, and soft tissue sarcomas. Also, in rural areas, pesticides can cause long-term impacts on workers and consumers, even people who just live next to these farms. So, these pesticides can harm brain function and are associated with preterm births and neurological disorders, especially for people who are working near or living in agricultural areas. They found that pesticides can also affect children, even in utero. So that's specifically on our health. So we need a question. So how did pesticide use end up getting industrialized? and why is it so used globally and especially here in the United States? So you have to think about pesticides is actually a $14 billion industry in the US. That's two-thirds of the agricultural use. So a lot of times these herbicides or pesticides are also paired with genetically modified seeds, so that the seeds or the vegetable crops that are growing can actually resist these pesticides better than regular crops. So there are 6 major agricultural chemical companies, which have actually merged into 3 more recently. So Dow DuPont, ChemChina, Syngenta, and Bayer Monsanto. Actually, that's 4. I don't know why it says 3, but it's merged into these 4 companies. And so now they are mega corporations, essentially forming almost monopolies, which provides farmers with less options when it comes to getting the supplies they need to produce as much produce as possible for the lowest price possible. So these are really the power players when it comes to why chemicals is so consistent and common in the agricultural field. And we have to talk about also that these companies have a lot of political power when it comes to influencing legislators and lobbying for thank you, lobbying for certain laws and regulations that favor their products and their profit margins. So let's move on. I see that there is something in the chat. Give me 1 second.
This is sad.
Yes, it's true. They only really care for profit. Health is definitely not the priority in this case. So, okay. So, specifically when it comes to these agrochemical companies, they have spent over 33 million in lobbying in Congress in 2016. And it's a revolving door. You know, these industry leaders end up serving government agencies as well as they keep in these industries, that way they can keep on regulation when it comes to these pesticides and agricultural products. Okay, and the messed up thing about it actually is these companies have so much money and so much power that they're actually able to influence the research when it comes to their products. So oftentimes, if there is specific research saying that these products are harmful, they have this unintended effect on our health or environment, they end up putting out other studies using their own money with the best scientists as possible to counter that argument and say, oh no, there was no actually effect found. This is actually harmless. And they end up basically muting the criticism of their product with studies that only show proof that it's safer, but it's not really told to the public that they're the ones that are actually funding that research. So a lot of times that's what ends up happening. I see another chat. Yes, it is crazy that rich businessmen are easily getting into politics to make laws that help maintain this. Yes, that's a really good comment, Elizabeth. Thank you. Okay. So you may ask, what can we do as urban gardeners? So it's already mentioned before, Nicole mentioned this before. If we change the demand when it comes to these vegetables and specifically organic vegetables, we can have at least some influence when it comes to what farmers will prioritize, and what the market will want to basically move towards. But there's some other ways that you can do it other than just buying organic produce. So step 1, you can get involved in organizations that are actively trying to curb pesticide use while working with farmers to basically convert them to doing organic practices. Some examples are Pesticide Action Network and Beyond Pesticides. And then there is a specific list, the Guide to Pesticides and Produce, which basically finds out, tells you what crops contain certain pesticide residues, which ones have more, which ones have less. You can look it up under the Environmental Workers Group Shoppers List. This is a really good resource if you yourself want to lower the amount of exposure that you have. And then you have to exert your opinions on legislators as well. You have to tell them that you're against pesticide use and you have concerns about pesticide use. And then for at home, what you can do to reduce your exposure is not just buying organic, but also washing all produce, whether it's conventional produce or organic under running water. That can help reduce a lot of your exposure. Okay, so I think that was it. So these are some resources and links that we will actually send to you via email. I'm going to leave it on just for a second if you guys want to take a screenshot or take a picture of it, but we will be sending this in a follow-up email. So after going through this whole presentation on pesticides, I want to open up the floor a little bit to everyone. Does anyone have any final comments before we move on to the gardening portion of this workshop? No hands? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for attending this part of the workshop. Oh, I do see some chat stuff actually. One second. So let me see. Marianne is saying we need to introduce, expand, educate friends, public to having the experience organic farming themselves to understand the impact. So they may impact policymakers and make the changes that need to be made. That's totally right, Marianne. Thank you. Anything else? All right, so we are going to move on to the gardening workshop. Thank you everyone for sitting through our food justice portion. Hopefully this will give you some time to think when it comes to your choices, when it comes to favoring more sustainable agricultural practices. All right, let me stop sharing. Let me open the other window. Give me 1 second. Oh, Sean, did you have something to say?
Hi, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Shopping at farmers markets is a good way to get organic produce at a better price. That's pretty evident to me at the Watsonville Farmers Market. Also shopping there, if you're using SNAP, then they'll actually give you $10 more to shop with. Something that the Center for Farm Working Families puts out there right away when they educate people and tell them about their also tell them about their organization is that children in farm working families have a much higher rate of childhood cancers. So and I remember it's only been a couple of years. There was a school in Watsonville, I believe, that was across the street from some fields, and the children, the parents and the children were concerned, and they wrote to the farmers and to the farmer, and they were, there was a call out in the community for the farmer to go organic, and the farmer did. So the farmer reacted to those children and their parents and made this better choice. And the whole reason that started was because children were getting sick. They were more sick there were more of them sick and more often on the days while they were spraying in the days afterwards. So that's what started the whole thing. And you know, sometimes when you ask a community member to you know, to react to the other you know, some of the other needs of the community, they respond the right way and right away. That's encouraging.
It is, and you know that's what we do want to encourage when it comes to farms to really start moving towards that path. You know, because there's a lot more benefits than there is harm, and it costs us more to us as a community when it comes to our health and when it comes to environment. So you have to kind of weigh it out and see what is better for the long term. You know. So thank you, Sean. Moria, I see that you have your hand up.
All right. I have actually two comments. I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
The first one is about pesticides and seeds. So in commercial agriculture, there's a really, really limited range of different types of vegetables that are or fruits that are grown, because they have basically they've maximized, like they use seeds or for plants that are able to withstand high levels of Roundup.
Mhm.
So there's only certain varieties that are commercially, viable this way, and that have been bred to be able to stand up really high levels of pesticides. So that also means that there's really only a few kinds of vegetables that people are able to buy. So there's kind of this linkage between the seeds and the pesticides. It means that farmers have to buy new seeds every year. None of them are using open pollinated seeds that they can save. So that it's like all of it is tied to the whole industrial system of selling seeds that are patented. Anyway, for us as people, who are eating food, it means that there's just a really limited range of different types available, and that there's a huge advantage in growing our own, because then we can grow different kinds of tomatoes and different kinds of cucumbers and beans. So it's wonderful. That's the first thing. Then the second thing I wanted to say, I know it's a little different than what LMV does, and it may not be something available to many folks, but I wanted to let you know that I have been gardening at one of the city's community garden places where I rent a space. And one of the advantages I have found that is really shocking to me and really interesting is that people who garden there often throw away edible food, like let's say broccoli leaves. There's just like huge amounts of broccoli leaves that are thrown away, and cauliflower leaves. And there were Brussels sprouts leaves back when there were Brussels sprouts. So there's just like kind of this ongoing source of food I have that is just what people put in the compost piles. So I don't know if there's anyone else that might want to consider, and I think it probably is not the same at all of the different gardens. I have a friend who used to garden at one of the community gardens, and she said she didn't find that there was a lot thrown away. But it's something you might want to consider, because a lot of times gardeners, have more than they can. So that's it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Moria. Oh, go ahead, Joel. This is the last one. We're going to have to move on soon.
That was really interesting, Moria. And I was wondering how expensive it is to rent a place. Like, I remember it used to be fairly reasonable, but now in Palo Alto, the 4-H garden is really expensive. And I was wondering if there's what kind of price range there is of renting your own garden space.
Yeah, that's a good point, because actually most of the community gardens in San Jose have long waiting lists. Mine doesn't. But
oh yeah.
So
nice.
it depends on this. It depends. It's not the same at all of them, because it depends on the size of your garden, and it also depends on how much water that community garden used last year. It's based on the price of the water use of the garden last year. So my particular garden that is 600 square feet, which is, by the way, huge. I paid for the whole year at $30 a month, so it was $360 for 2021.
And also, Joel, I did some research on this pretty recently. There are some costs as low as $12.50 in some gardens, but like Moria said, the watering fee is actually additional to that. So that's something to consider. That's once a month.
The fee that I just said there's not an additional fee that covers the water, but it's based on the water use last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
you. Get these at a particular some area like in public lands or something that people can get these spots, or probably private property?
These are government. This is county owned community
Oh.
wells. Yeah. So,
Oh, I see. Interesting.
and
Joel,
Joel-
you can contact me if you want to come visit sometime.
yeah.
Oh, that's great. I know that one Palo Alto, they had the 4-H garden, and I checked, and it was $400 a month.
Ooh, wow. Okay. No. There's more reasonable
Like a
places out there.
Little tiny little.
Okay, Joel, we're
Earth joint or something. Yeah.
move on, if that's okay, because we are running behind schedule, about 8 minutes. So after that presentation, I would like everyone to actually click on the link that I am sharing in chat right now. This is a short survey just talking about the food justice portion of our workshop. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to fill this out if you can. And then we're going to move on to the gardening portions. So we'll revisit around 10:36, 10:38, and then we'll continue on with the workshop, okay? Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Is there nothing going on, or my phone just not hearing anything?
Oh, Joel, so we're filling out the survey right now. I know you can't fill out the survey since you're calling in. We will send this.
Maybe because it's
My
an
email
small
or
room.
something.
Sorry, we will send the survey link in an email afterwards if you want to answer it later.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, okay. You guys have my email, I guess. There's no weird
Yes.
names at email. Yeah.
Yes, we have your email, so we will send it after this workshop. Okay.
I know.
Okay. All right, we have 2 minutes left. Good. Thank you, everyone. 11 people have responded so far. I appreciate it.
I'd probably say everything the best.
Okay, 1 more minute. Awesome. Thank you so much. We have 17 people responding.
Oh, no. I'm recording this, but nobody minds.
Okay, everyone, it's time to finish up now. We're almost done. Perfect. 21 people responded. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the next presentation. Thank you, everyone. Give me one moment. Oop. Share screen. All right. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so let's get started. So in this portion is our gardening workshop on organic fertilizers and worm composting. All right, so we need to ask ourselves, what is compost versus fertilizer? So the definition of compost is that it's decomposed organic matter that's created through the recycling of organic material, which is a natural process. It can include leaves, vegetable scraps that turn into a rich soil amendment. Compost is also known as black gold, which is unique as it actually helps enrich the soil food web, or basically encourage life in the soil, which includes microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi. With fertilizers, both organic or chemical fertilizers, it's either sourced from natural or synthetic materials such as manure or nitrogen, specifically petroleum or natural gas products, phosphorus and potassium compounds. Fertilizers are really more intended to meet the needs of fast-growing plants versus enriching the life in the soil. So this is just an example of what compost typically is. You can see all the food scraps in this part, and you can see how, oh, sorry, one second. So you can see how the compost is almost similar to soil. It breaks down naturally into this. All of this will turn into that. And then on the right is more of a conventional fertilizer. This is a granulated fertilizer. You can see the person is actually having to wear gloves because they don't want to expose themselves too much. But this is usually a slow release fertilizer that you sprinkle into the garden. So that's one type of fertilizer that people sometimes use in gardening. All right, so Ines, why is soil environment so important for the growth of plants? So soil environment is basically temperature, the pH, nutrients, microbes, and fungi. And these components are important to helping plants actually absorb nutrients. And in specifically compost, there are billions of bacteria and fungi, which help enrich the soil and ensure plants are getting the nutrients they actually really need. So we're going to go over organic fertilizers for your garden. So this is a quote I really like by the Burpee Seed Company. And this is just to explain a little bit about organic gardening. So organic gardening is more than simply avoiding synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. It's about observing nature's processes and emulating them in your garden the best you can. And the most important way you do that is to understand the makeup of your soil and really give it what it needs. If anything, the only rule in organic gardening is that you need to feed the soil and not the plant. All right, so you may ask yourself, when should you actually be using fertilizers in the garden? And there's 3 distinct times that you can actually use fertilizers. One is when you're planting out new plants in the garden. So say it's April 24th, it's planting season, and you haven't amended your garden. So you would put compost or some kind of fertilizer in the hole that you're planting your plant, and you would plant it at the same time. Also during the active growth process of the plants throughout the growing season, and also when the plants are flowering or fruiting. These are all essential times, and there are certain fertilizers that work better in these stages than others. It just depends on the results that you want. All right, so when you go to the store, you'll often find fertilizer bags or bottles on the shelf, and you'll see that they will have 3 major nutrients or 3 numbers on the label, which indicate nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And I wanted to go through this just because I want you guys to understand what these major nutrients do when it comes to providing a more ideal environment for your plants to grow. So specifically nitrogen, you want to think that nitrogen helps plants grow upwards, right? It helps with green leafy growth. So nitrogen is especially good for leafy vegetables. Now, phosphorus helps plants grow downwards, which helps to develop the roots of the plant so they can better absorb nutrients. It encourages a lot of flowering and a lot of fruit and seed production. So it's best for fruiting vegetables, kind of like peppers and tomatoes. And potassium helps the plant grow just overall, stronger roots, stems, faster growth. It also helps with the plant's immune system when it comes to resisting diseases, heat, cold, and drought. So you'll see these numbers all the time on fertilizers that you find at the store. And depending on the number, it's usually 1 to 10. You really want it to be a higher number on specific parts depending on what you want. So say you are growing like collards or kale or lettuce, you'd want to focus on more of a nitrogen, more higher number on nitrogen. Then say tomatoes or peppers would need a little bit, they'll need some nitrogen, but they'll need at least some phosphorus for it to fruit and flower a lot better. So you can judge really which fertilizer you want to use according to that. All right, so there are 2 different types of fertilizer. I like to break it up into these 2 categories just because we really need to talk about the sustainable use of different types of fertilizer. There are animal-based fertilizers and there are plant-based fertilizers. And so the issue with animal-based fertilizers is obviously a lot of it is from factory farming. A lot of it is animal byproducts. And so if you ethically do not want to support those industries, I would suggest not to rely on animal-based fertilizers. But it is something that is still used commonly. It can be organic in certain instances, but there's a lot more inputs and a lot more impacts when it comes to the environment when you're talking about animal-based fertilizers. And then there's the alternative that we like to encourage a little bit more is plant-based fertilizers. This can come from legumes and other types of plants that help bring back nutrients into the soil and are a little bit more sustainable compared to animal-based fertilizers, and tend to be a lot better for your soil life as well. So we'll continue on. So I'm going to touch just a little bit on animal manure. So the pros is that animal manure is high in nutrients and it can be often sourced for free from local farms or areas like rural areas, farming areas, and at local nurseries for low prices. The only issues is that it can smell and sometimes burn your plants because of the high nitrogen and salt content. And it's also best to add this particular fertilizer a month or 2 before planting. That way it can heat up and then cool down and it won't burn your plants. The best types of animal manures you'd want to use in your garden are horse manure and rabbit manure. And both of these you can easily source either from a local farm, stables for horses, or you can raise your own rabbits at home or source it from other pet owners. And the reason why I focus on these 2 particular ones is that both of these animals are vegetarian. There isn't any meat sources, obviously, that they're using. It's less chances of them being exposed to hormones, exposed to antibiotics, but they tend to be a little bit easier when it comes to.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm here.
I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Oh, so it tends to be a little bit safer when it comes to using those 2 types of manures from those animals. And then you need to talk about the less ideal manures. These are manures from factory farming. There's often overuse of hormones and antibiotics in proper diets. It tends to have high salt content, often harmful microbes that can cause disease. So that is including cow and steer manure and sometimes chicken manure as well. The only difference is chicken often you can raise at home, and if you control more of the diet, you can determine whether or not there's more of those residues and whether or not they're getting a better diet than compared to factory farm chickens. So that's something to consider if you do want to use animal manure. There are pros, benefits, and cons when it comes to actually using it. Personally, for me, when I get compost from the store, it's usually a mixture of both plant and animal manure. I just make sure that it's well composted before I even use it in the gardens. All right, moving on. So these are some plant and one of them animal byproduct materials that you can actually use from home to fertilize. So this is fertilizing specifically with kitchen scraps. So tea leaves in particular, if you drink a lot of tea or drink a lot of coffee, both of these are really good fertilizers for your garden. Tea leaves contain a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Ground coffee has a lot of nitrogen. Worms love it, and it also deters slugs. There are fruit peels that you can use as well. There's a lot of potassium and minerals, especially in banana peels, that can be blended into water and planted with the plant to provide a potassium boost. Eggshells themselves, when crushed and put into the garden, can actually add a lot of calcium carbonate into the soil, which is great for plants, especially when it comes to fruit development. And then cooking water from when you're cooking veggies, pasta, eggs, rice, anything like that, has actually a lot of nutrients. So you can let that pot of water cool down and you can actually water your plants with that as well. All right, so this is a little dense. I'm going to cover the individual animal products and plant products. Like I said, I'm going to be sending this presentation to everyone so that they can review it if you want to read a little bit more into it, but I'm just going to cover it briefly. Sudha, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yes, Carlo. I have a quick question.
Yes.
So you said like the cooked water, right? Like the pasta or the rice.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So is it good for the the both the indoor and outdoor? Because the thing is like I observed like when we give like especially pasta water. So many what is that like ants are like attracting that ants are started eating the plants itself.
Okay, so it really just depends on the situation. I would only really use it outdoors, and it depends on whether or not you have a high presence of ants. It depends on the pasta too. So you have to think of pasta water. It's high in starches. It's high in sugars when you're boiling it, basically. It's boiling carbohydrates, right? So that can attract certain insects if you use too much of it. I would say use it moderately. If you do notice any insects actually attacking your plants after using it, then obviously do not use it. But the liquid itself is full of nutrients, and you really have, it's really your call whether or not you want to use it in your garden. But if you notice that, oh, you may have an ant colony or two in your garden, then feel free not to use that method at all, because there's plenty of other methods that you can use to add nutrients in your garden.
Okay, thank you, Carlo.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so we're going to go over a little bit about animal products and animal byproducts and materials made from plants. So with animal byproducts, there are specific ones such as bone meal, blood meal, and fish emulsions. These are all very commonly used by organic farmers. Obviously, they're not vegetarian sources when it comes to using fertilizers in your garden. So it's really more of a gardener's personal choice if they use these or not. They are all products of industrial farming of these animals. I think blood and bone meal is from meat packing plants. And then fish meal is usually the remnants of the fish farming industry. So that's something to consider when it comes to using these products. And then some products can be made from alfalfa, in specific alfalfa meal and pellets. These are all plant-based. And there's also kelp meal and emulsions that can be used in the garden as well. The main difference is that a lot of the animal byproducts are quick release, with the exception of fish meal and fish emulsion, and actually bone meal as well. But depending on what you want to do, if you want to give a lot of nutrients all at once, you would go with blood meal. If not, you can go with bone meal and fish meal. And the only issue, like personally for me, why I do not use this other than fish emulsions, is that it can attract different pests and animals into your garden, because there's a lot of proteins, a lot of fats in some of this, and it can attract other animals into your garden. So that's something you need to consider. In terms of plant stuff, you won't get that issue as much. If anything, it's more so going to encourage biodiversity when it comes to the insects and other life that's in your soil. All right, so we need to talk about market produced compost. So there's 3 types that you need to consider when it comes to your garden. So there's forest humus, which is a byproduct from the floors of flourishing forest environments. It contains a lot of bacteria and fungi that are naturally occurring, but it doesn't have a lot of nutrients in terms of nitrogen, phosphorus, and all those macronutrients. Oh, I see someone. Help. Oh, Marsha, I saw your comment. If you're using salt in your pasta water, I would not use it in your garden, especially if you're using a lot of salt. Oh, Joel, I see you raised your hand. Joel, can you hear me? You're on mute.
I wonder if people can grow their own spirulina algae or similar chlorophyll type thing, and if those are good for the soil.
Definitely
if
they
you
are.
had to buy it, it's too expensive to buy it, but you
It
have
is.
to grow it.
It
have
is.
it cultivated.
Yeah, it is. It is possible for you to grow it at home, but honestly, with the amount that you need for gardening, and the requirements when it comes to growing these things, it takes a lot of input to actually grow them, especially if you're just starting out. So I understand that
So it's really expensive.
it can be really expensive when you're just buying it off the shelf. But there are other cheaper options out there. You don't necessarily have to rely on those particular fertilizers.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you, Joel.
Okay.
All right. 1 second. Okay, so we talked about forest humus a little bit. The next one, which is the one that I usually prefer and I actually make at home, is worm castings. These provide all the essential plant nutrients and increases the soil's resistance against harmful bacteria or fungi. And then this is one that actually some of our veteran members have used before, mushroom compost. It in itself does not carry as much nutrients as other types of composts, but it does increase the water holding capacity of your soil. And if you have clay soil, it breaks up the clay soil. And then just a quick note. So phosphorus is actually found, this is specifically the one that helps with root growth, with flowering and fruit production and seed production. It tends to be in sufficient amounts in most soils. And the thing is that plants can't really take up phosphorus as well without oh my God, I can't pronounce this sometimes, mycorrhizal fungi. And so encouraging healthy soil is really what's going to help plants access phosphorus levels. Okay. So the main thing about fertilizers that you get at the market, I'll call on you in a moment, Sudha. Let me finish this first. The main thing of you want to look for on the label of any fertilizers you buy at the market is the OMRI for organic use label. That's the Organic Materials Review Institute, which is this nonprofit that independently reviews products such as fertilizers, pesticides, even animal feed, into the certification of organic produce and processing. And they have pretty high standards when it comes to measuring products against the current organic standards in the industry. So this is the exact label that you will see on some of those fertilizers. That's what you really want to look for when it comes to fertilizers and staying organic in your garden. Okay, Sudha, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's related to the fertilizer,
Yeah.
Carlos. So the thing is, like, I have been using this homemade fertilizer, like using Epsom salt, the baking soda, and the liquid nitrogen bought from a store.
Mhm.
So, like, you know, usually, like, I use it for indoor plants, but can I use it for outdoors too?
I'm pretty sure you can. I'm not as sure about the Epsom salt part of it because some plants are going to be more sensitive to salt content, but you know, you can definitely use it outside. You just have to make sure that it's from organic sources, especially when it comes to nitrogen supplement. So are you using this mostly for like ornamental plants indoors?
Not really. I'm using, like, you know, pretty much like so many plants. Like, you know, I have 51 plants indoors, so I'm just using pretty much for everything.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, the only thing I wanted to ask, like, you know, whether I can use it for outdoors.
Yeah.
It's not cost effective.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just like Lisa said, like, you know, it's not going to be as cost effective compared to other fertilizers. You can definitely try and then really, you know, play it by ear when it comes to plants' responses to that fertilizer. But you know, to make it in larger batches, especially for a larger garden, can be a little bit more difficult. So it's really your own personal choice. I would
Okay.
say experiment with it. If you like the results and are able to afford the resources to make it, then definitely you can try it that way.
Okay, so I would like to add one more fertilizer that I'm using, like, you know, it's a fish tank water. It has
Yes.
everything.
Oh,
So
plants love fish tank water. Oh my
yes.
gosh, it's so good. Yeah, so I used to exclusively water my plants when I had a larger fish tank. Uh, every 2 weeks, some of the fish tank water from our aquarium, and you know, it's basically diluted fish fertilizer that you would get at the store. You know, you don't have to dilute it yourself because it's already naturally made by your pet fish. So no, it's a fantastic source. You do have to consider the kind of food that you're feeding your fish when it comes to using aquarium water, but I've had really good results using it before. I see another chat thing. What kind of water? Oh, fish tank water. So if you keep fishes or aquariums, you can actually use that water on your plants.
And it's pH balanced.
Yeah, plants absolutely love it. So I know that from experience. Okay, so we went into the OMRI label. So that's something that you really need to look at when it comes to getting any kind of fertilizer at the market. All right, so these are some recipes you guys can use to make some free fertilizer at home. So there's 2 recipes that I want to share with you. One is Compost Tea. So there's 3 basic steps for it. So 1, you can fill up a bucket or extra container with water, and then you let it sit out for a couple hours or overnight for chlorine to evaporate. The best water you can actually use is wild harvested water from your gutters, specifically rainwater. Then if you have an old sock, you can put a cup or 2 of aged compost into it and tie off the open end and put it in the bucket. Also, if you want to encourage more microbes and add iron to this mixture, you can put 1 to 2 spoonfuls of unsulfured or Blackstrap Molasses that you can usually get at the store to add to the water. And then in order to keep it aerated, you want to get an aquarium pump, an airline, and an air stone and aerate it overnight. And then the next day, you can remove the sock. Any of the content of the compost in the sock, you can actually use that compost in the garden. You can just dress your plants with it. And then the liquid itself, you can actually use as a fertilizer, a compost tea. And you can also dilute it with a little bit more water in a spray bottle to use it as a foliar feed for your plants. So this is one way you can actually use compost as a fertilizer. And then This is one if you're a little bit more frugal and you have access to a lot of green plant material, you can do the same process of filling a bucket of water, let it stand to let chlorine evaporate or use rainwater. And there are certain plants that actually make up really good fertilizer and make this water very nutrient dense. So you can use pesticide-free grass clippings or disease-free green plant residue. Weeds without seeds are okay. Pruning clippings are okay. There's two specific ones I want you to consider when making this. There's a specific plant called comfrey, which is what is in this picture itself. This is a very mineral and nutrient rich plant that you can put into this mixture. Also, there's this weed called stinging nettle, which is also full of nutrients. You can use it in this mixture as well. Just make sure you wear gloves if you're going to use stinging nettle. And the best thing you can do to make this more effective is to chop up this material into the bucket with water or bruise the material so that you're basically allowing it to really soak in the water. And then the same process before with the compost tea. You can use the aquarium pump, airline, and air stone to keep it aerated. You can let it sit overnight or for up to 2, maybe more days. It just depends on how long you want to leave it. Remove all the plant matter from the water, use it in your compost bin or pile, and then you can use the liquid, same as if you were watering the garden, or you can dilute it with some water in a spray bottle for foliar feed. So these are two different options that you can do. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions about how to make compost tea or worm tea or any type of teas at all, I do not use any bottled nutrients to feed my gardens. I've been making tea for years, so I feel like I'm kind of an expert in this field, and I'm just putting it out there if anybody needs any help at all in guidance through this process, because you have to be careful. Sometimes you can overdo it, and sometimes you can underdo it and find that the results are less rewarding. So you would want to avoid that. Again, I'm opening the door to anybody that wants to ask me any questions about the tea. I am the tea lady.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate
No
you
worries.
being a resource. So I see, Hiroko, you have a question. What kind of weeds are good for fertilizer tea? So most weeds are okay for fertilizer tea. The main ones I would recommend, obviously, is the stinging nettle that I mentioned before. Also, dandelions, both the flowers, stems, and leaves are actually really high in nutrients and minerals. Because dandelions really dig deep into the soil and are able to absorb a lot. So dandelions are a really good weed to put into it. I mentioned using grass clippings is completely fine as well. The main thing you don't want to use is any invasive plants. Especially if the roots are still intact, you want to make sure you take out all that plant residue from the bucket before you start using the liquid, because you don't want to end up spreading weeds throughout your garden, especially with stuff like Bermuda grass. If there's pieces of Bermuda grass in your water, that's a no-go. You don't want to use that in your fertilizer tea.
Can I interject again?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a little bit advanced, but it's very simple, and comes from the KNF gardening, and it's Korean natural farming. And I'm going to just try to outline this as simple as I possibly can. Anything that's fast growing and green. So I might dispel some of the things you just said there, Carlos, but not to cause problems, but just to allow people to not throw away things that grow green and grow fast will make your plants grow green and grow fast. So it's an easy equation. Even things like Bermuda grass, if you do this one process and use brown sugar and the plant material, and then you put it in a bucket and you pound it down with a stick and you add the equal amount of brown sugar and the plant material, then that will turn into a ferment. You let it sit, cover it with a towel, let it sit for a while, and then you can take that liquid and add it to your compost tea, and that will actually bring what you just pounded down into that bucket and turned into ferment will also transfer into your garden. If you find flowers will help your plant when they're fruiting and flowering. It's an easy equation. Anything that grows green and fast is for green growth. You can ferment that and put a G on that bucket, and that's for your green growth. Anything that is flowering or budding, those buds, those flowers get harvested in the morning when they're the best. And you pound those down in a bucket, and you add the equal amount of brown sugar to that as well. And you cover that and let it ferment. That is your only fertilizer that you could potentially need. You never have to buy another bottled nutrient again. It seems advanced, but really it's as basic as 1, 2, 3. And I'll post my number here. And if anybody has any questions about it, I can suggest 2 really, really good books. And or you can just ask me the questions and I'd be more than welcome to answer them. Again, no, not to cause problems, Carlos. I know that some seeds transferred into your compost can potentially transfer into your garden, but if your compost is heated, then those seeds will die, and then everything and it'll transfer back into your garden again. So and that's when you're using straw and it has seeds in it, that will definitely transfer into your garden. So you want to be careful with that. But if you're composting at the right temperature, or you're worm composting those materials, the worms and or the heated compost will kill those seeds, and you can transfer that into your garden without worry of those weeds repeating themselves.
So I just want to clarify a little bit when it comes to the seeds. I understand there are some seeds the worms will help eat, Lisa, but there are some some weed seeds that they're not able to process as well, especially harder seeds. So I just want to put like an asterisk on that. You still need to be a little bit cautious when it comes to putting any kind of weeds, especially weeds with seeds, into your compost, just as a precaution. So it just depends on the weed. Okay, so Hiroko, you said, why do you use iron for compost tea? So when we're using specifically the Blackstrap Molasses, iron is used in the growth of plants as well. It's a micronutrient that plants do need in their soil. Also, we're more so using the Blackstrap Molasses for feeding the microbes, because essentially what you're doing is exactly what Lisa is saying. You're basically helping ferment the tea a little bit, because that is good for the microorganisms in your soil, which in turn help provide nutrients for your plants. So that's why we're using Blackstrap Molasses. It is optional. You don't necessarily need to use it, but it is encouraged to use it if you want to ferment your tea a little bit, which is good for your plants. Okay, so is there any other questions? Oh, and Sean, completely agree with you. Do eat your dandelion greens. They're super healthy. They can be a little bit bitter, but if you know how to cook them and you pick them when they're young, dandelion greens are just as good for you as they are for your plants. All right, so it doesn't look like there's any other questions, so we're gonna go ahead and move on. Thank you, everyone. Like I said, we're gonna be sending this presentation for everyone, so if you need the recipe, you will be receiving that, okay? All right, so, Joel, did you have something to say?
I was wondering if should you filter your ferment water with a sock or something, or
cloth, or
make sure you
a
get all the
screen.
seeds out?
Yes, so long as it's fine enough. It may get a little clogged depending on the screen or whatever you're using, but you can definitely filter it. That's completely fine.
Or also, if you have it warm enough for long enough, probably all the seeds will just germinate and then they'll die probably.
I know, but that can take up to a week to happen. And honestly, you don't want your tea sitting out for an entire week. Maybe a day or two, but not for an entire week. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Joe. All right. So we're going to go in a little bit on the pros and cons versus compost versus fertilizer. So the specific things about pros about compost is that it's usually completely free or natural. You can actually reduce the household waste going into the landfill. It's also better for the life and biodiversity of your soil. And it's unlikely that it will burn your plants as easily as regular fertilizer. It improves soil structure. It improves water retention in your garden as well. And also it's pretty easy to apply. The cons are it often takes time and work to actually make compost. Some materials can be hard to source, and the nutrient profile really depends on the ingredients you're using for the compost. Oh, and one con that I didn't put in here, when you're buying compost from the store, sometimes it can actually be a little bit expensive. Um, all right, moving on to fertilizers. The pros of fertilizers is it's widely available. Usually it's uniform when it comes to its nutrient profile, because like I said earlier, those three numbers on the label, it's usually on the label telling you what's actually in it. And then it's pretty easy to apply as well. The only issues with some fertilizers, especially synthetic fertilizers, is that it can actually disrupt the soil food web if it's not organic and natural. It can also burn your plants, especially uh, fertilizers that are higher in nitrogen. You can give a little bit too much and it can cause burning. Um, Also, it can be expensive getting a fertilizer, especially from the store. You also think about runoff. It's similar to runoff when it comes to pesticides. Nitrogen, especially chemical nitrogen, can wash out into our water supply and into our groundwater. And so there's issues. You guys hear about the red tides when it comes to our ocean. Algae blooms in freshwater ponds or reservoirs as well. That's a result from excess nitrogen that has been washed off because of fertilizer. So those are toxic to both people and animals. So that's one con when it comes to using fertilizer. Also, synthetic nitrogen fertilizers often are made from petroleum or natural gas. So that's not a sustainable resource. So you have to consider that if you're using synthetic versus natural. All right, I see there is one chat thing. Lisa said, Jadam Organic Farming is a book that's about ultra low cost agriculture. You can get it on Amazon. Thank you, Lisa. All right, we're gonna move on. So why should you actually make your own compost? Well, there are 3 reasons why you should try doing it. The main ones are environmental, you reduce the amount of waste that goes into the landfill, and reduce your carbon footprint. Also, it encourages self-sufficiency when it comes to relying less on outsourced sources of compost and fertilizer, especially from the bigger agricultural corporations and companies. Also, it encourages soil biology and improves structure and nutrients, improves the bioactivity in your soil, so your plants can actually thrive. All right, worm composting. I think this picture will gross out some of you, but I assure you worm composting is the way to go when it comes to creating free compost for your garden. So the couple of things that make composting so much better is that it's actually faster using worms to compost your excess material. You can have the same results in 1 to 2 months instead of 3 to 6 months compared to traditional composting. You can also use smaller containers. For me, myself, I use bin containers for my worms, and I actually keep them indoors. And I feed the majority, mostly my junk mail, my paper mail, coffee grounds, tea bags, and some fruits and vegetables. So it's really convenient. It's not as messy as you would imagine having worms indoors. They're all contained in one container. And it's useful, especially if you live in like an apartment complex and you're only using it for, say, your potted plants, or if you have some plants on your balcony. It's especially useful because it doesn't take up that much room. Also, it produces a very high quality compost and compost tea that you can use in your garden. It's top-notch stuff. This is black gold, um, you know, and it's really expensive when you get it at the store. Also, you never really need to turn worm compost. The worms do the tilling and the turning for you. And if you do it right, it won't actually smell. The only smell that you may notice is that it smells a little bit earthy. And also, it's fun. It's like having hundreds of little tiny pets. They don't bark, they don't meow, and they don't leave fur all over the place. So that's actually pretty nice. Not to say I don't like dogs and cats, but worms are honestly a lot easier. And I just want to clarify when it comes to worm composting, you want to use red wiggler worms, not earthworms. Red wigglers are completely different from earthworms. Redworms are surface feeders, which is perfect for living in an environment that you would have for composting food scraps. So earthworms will not be able to process it as well. They will actually die if you keep them in that kind of container. So I'm gonna move on. Oh, I see another chat thing. Oh, you're welcome. No problem, Lisa. All right. So the cons of worm composting. So like I mentioned earlier, it won't kill all weed seeds. So you really do not want to put weed seeds that have gone to seed. They do need protection against cold and hot water. They are living organisms, so they do need to be cared for. And also, if you use fruit scraps, especially a lot of fruit scraps, you may get problems with fruit flies. So for me personally, I don't compost fruit scraps as much, only in very small amounts. It also takes time and energy to separate worms from the compost. And the startup cost really depends on what materials you are using to start the bins. Also, the cost of getting a starter batch of worms to colonize your bins. Oh, I see. 1 second. I see something in chat. Oh, no, we're good. Okay. All right, so these are some examples of worm bins. The one all the way to the left is a homemade bin. You see there's some holes to allow for some air into the bin. This is actually the setup that I have at home. I have a 2-bin setup, 1 bin to collect any of the moisture or the liquid fertilizer in the bottom, and the main bin where you add the food and you have the worms. But this is a very simple setup. I personally really love it. It's very simple. Nothing breaks easily, and the worms are pretty much contained. They don't leave the bin. So this is one that I really like. And the middle one is a built one out of wood. This is definitely an outdoor bin, but you can see you can have a huge amount of room to compost your materials. There are a ton of worms in this kind of setup. And then on the right is a worm composting bin that's layered. This is a commercially available one. This is actually one that we have in the demo garden here at Sacred Heart. We actually have a big colony of worms that we feed using a lot of the excess food scraps or food from the pantry, especially like vegetable or fruit scraps. We actually feed it directly to this bin, and basically in the bottom level is where it's going to have the most compost. You add new materials on the top layers, and you move these layers and use the compost as needed, and the worms just continually move up. Also, there's a little spout on here that you can use to get some of the liquid fertilizer out of the bin, which is excellent for your garden. Okay. So I see Moria saying, San Jose sells worm bins at a discounted price if you live in San Jose. The one they sell is not shown, but it costs $50. This was about a year ago. You can get it from the city. And sometimes they do sell out pretty fast. So if you do look for it right now, but there are other options also. But San Jose does encourage using worm composting to reduce your waste into the landfill. So thank you for that, Moria. All right, so we're gonna watch a quick video. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I need to share the sound. It's gonna show a little bit about the quick setup that I use. Also, how to layer all the materials and add the worms. 1 second.
Welcome to Pass the Pistol, a series about small space gardening, design, and hands-on living. I'm Emily Murphy, and I'm making a worm bin. Now, it might not sound that exciting, but worms are a fabulous way to recycle your kitchen scraps and make soil for your garden. These are red wiggler worms. They're surface feeders, and they make compost quickly by eating through your kitchen scraps. The first thing to remember when making a worm bin is that they're living creatures. And like other living creatures, they need food, water, shelter, and air. So my worm bin has to have circulation and ventilation. I've added these drill holes here using a 1/4-inch drill bit. This is going to be the bottom of my bin. You can see that it's solid, it doesn't have any holes. And then the next level actually has holes in it. Worms can move through here, water can move through here, sort of like a cup and a saucer. To make the bedding, I'm going to be using shredded newspaper and leaves because, believe it or not, worms will end up eating the bedding besides the kitchen scraps. I'm going to start by filling it about 1/3 full. Worms live in a moist environment, so their bin needs to be moist as well. And once that feels like a wrung out sponge, not too wet, not too dry, then I'm going to add a little bit of grit. This is garden soil. The grit helps the worms with their digestion, and I'm also adding fungi and bacteria to the bin at the same time, which also helps with decomposition. Next, of course, the worms. Now, I've ordered these from a local worm farm, but you can probably also find red wigglers, say, at a bait shop. I'm going to add them in, and I can add kitchen scraps now too. So you're going to add your kitchen scraps in, and you can add them in every few days, once a week. And when you do, just put the food in a new place. You put this in, so it's another 1/3 of bedding material. Spray it again so the newspaper is damp. You're going to cover it over, and you're going to store it in a location that's not too cold and not too hot, about 50 to 75 degrees. And there you have it. You can add kitchen scraps and make soil for your garden. For more simple solutions to creative gardening, visit PastThePistle.com. Find me on Pinterest, Facebook, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and remember, grow what you love.
Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Showed just a little bit of how to make your own worm bin. So let me represent this. I do see someone put something in the chat. Oh, Lisa has a a resource for earthworm compost. So for those who don't want to compost themselves, so feel free to contact Lisa if you want more information on that. All right, so we need a question. What can you put in worm compost? So these are just a simple list of what you can put. So you can do shredded paper. I usually do shredded junk mail, and bills, which is really satisfying. And cardboard you can put in, so long as you remove any tape that may be on it. You don't put any plastic into your bin. If you're doing the envelopes of your junk mail, they'll be completely fine putting paper into your bin. Also, crushed egg cells is really good grit. You can do fruits and vegetables. You can do bread, but only put a little bit in, especially if the bread has any kind of salt or butter in it. You don't really want to use that too much. There's tea bags. Just make sure you remove the staples and any plastic ones. You cannot use the tea bags that have the plastic filter on it or the paper on it, because that won't decompose. Then you can use grains, kind of like rice. If you have leftover rice that you're not using or it's gone bad, you can put that into the bin as well. Coffee grounds and paper filters. Worms absolutely love. Worms thrive with coffee grounds. And then you can put a little bit of leftover pasta if you want, but like with bread, you don't want to put too much into it. Okay, I see someone's hand is raised. Oh, yes, Spencer and Beverly, we will send a link to that video via email. So you will get that soon. And then Simone, I see that you raised your hand. Did you want to ask something?
Yeah. Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear
Yes, hello.
I heard there's some vegetables that are not, or some fruits and vegetables that are not good for worm composting, like
yes,
lemons and limes and stuff, citrus.
Yes, we will actually talk about that in the next slide. You're a little ahead of me.
My bad.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to that then. Okay. All right. So, what can you not use in general compost or specifically in worm composting? So you cannot use any meat or bones, no poultry or fish, no fatty food waste. Whole eggs are not good either, but the shells are okay, like mentioned before. You cannot use any dairy products. Obviously, do not use any human or pet feces. Some seeds you cannot use. Do not use seeds that have gone to seed or have spreading roots like Bermuda grass. You can't really use wood because the worms, wood will eventually get eaten, but unlike traditional composting, worms don't process wood as easily unless it's already decomposing. Any diseased plant matter you don't want to use either. And any fruit in the citrus family, any onions or garlic, you don't really want to use in the compost pile either, because that can be a little bit harmful to the worms as well. They won't be happy if you use those. Okay. I see another chat thing. Oh, yeah, no problem, Beverly. All right, so how do you maintain your worm bin? So what you do is you always bury scraps in the corners of your bin and cover with browns like moist shredded paper. You can use a spray bottle to moisten the paper a little bit. You just don't want it too moist. Like the woman in the video mentioned before, you just spray enough so that it feels like a ringed out sponge. Also, you have to make sure your liquid is draining on the bottom of your bin. And you harvest that compost tea. You can actually dilute that compost tea and use it as a fertilizer in your garden with a spray bottle or whatever watering can you may be using. Using too much fruits can bring fruit flies, so only add fruits in moderation. And harvest your compost regularly. You don't want your worms actually sitting in just pure compost all the time. That's not good for them. And also it reduces the amount of food that they can actually eat. Also, you can also pre-compost by chopping up the materials that you're using or placing those vegetable and fruit scraps in the freezer to soften it up a little bit. You can defrost it and then add it to your worm bin. All right, how do you protect your worms? So from heat and cold, specifically with heat, it was mentioned that you need to put your worms in a relatively shaded area or paint your bin white. This is especially true for black plastic bins. And in the cold, which honestly is not much of a worry here, especially if you keep your worms outdoors, you want to add more carbon. So more shredded newspapers, more dry leaf material. Also, coffee grounds can help keep your worms warm as well. In terms of protecting them from ants and other insects, if your worm bins are like that third bin with legs, those plastic legs, you can actually place larger cups on the legs of the bins in the bottom and fill them with water. It will actually prevent ants from climbing up your legs and trying to colonize or attack the worms in your bin. And then you just refill the water as necessary. Also, if your bin is on the ground, so you have a box bin or you have one of those plastic container bins, you can get this product called diatomaceous earth, which actually kills crawling insects. You can sprinkle that around your bin to prevent insects from going in, though it won't protect against flying insects, only crawling insects like ants. All right, so how do you harvest and use worm compost? So what you do is you feed only one side of the compost bin for a few days to a couple of weeks. Then you dump out the other side of the compost once the worms are eating all the food on the other side. And you make small cone-shaped piles in a bright room or outside in a shaded area. What will happen is that worms are actually light sensitive, so they will dive down to avoid the light. What you do is harvest the top of the piles after they've migrated down, and then you can return the worms to the worm bin. And then you can just repeat this process until you get enough compost that you can use in your garden. You can also, after you harvest your compost, you can sprinkle it around your plants or dress your plants on the surface, much like a mulch, or you can dig the compost into the first 1 or 2 inches of your soil. All right, so we've come to the end of the presentation. Does anyone have any questions or answers? Oh, sorry, just questions. I apologize. Okay, let's see. I have made this compost drum and it seems easy to use. Thank you, Arlette. All right, I see 2 people with raised hands. Sean, would you like to go first?
How much coffee grounds is too much coffee grounds? This house produces a lot, and a lot of tea leaves, but most of that is not yeah, most of that's herbal, but yeah, so that's my first question.
Yeah, so honestly, I feed a lot of coffee grounds to my worms and they absolutely love it. Though I only make, say, 1 cup of coffee every day, so it's not as much as I feel like you're producing. You really need to play it by ear. If anything, coffee composted by worms is an excellent compost. So you can
Okay.
give as much as you want. Just be wary. It's mentioned that too much coffee grounds, especially layered very heavily or very thick, they can warm up the bin if you put too much at once. So play it by ear, put a little bit at a time first, see how your worms react. Make sure that's not heating up your bin. Because coffee grounds are high in nitrogen, so it can heat up your bin. Just put enough to layer a small layer first, and then play it by ear. You really just need to see how your worms react to it.
So its acidity is not a factor.
No. The acidity is fine. It's more so the nitrogen content of the coffee grounds.
And the thing about tea bags now is people have a lot of manufacturers are producing them, and they have a plastic lattice in them. I mean, some are the ones that are completely plastic. Those are obvious, but this is something that's that a lot of people haven't noticed until they've just chucked the whole thing into their compost bin and then find that it hasn't degraded. But it turns out that worm composting, it will break that up into smaller pieces, just like people who put their dryer lint when they're not using fabric softeners and they're using more natural products and they're not overusing them. They're finding that the worms will break that up further as well. So anyway, I don't know if anybody has. I don't know. I don't know if that matters to anybody, but.
Thank you,
all right,
Sean.
thanks.
Hi, Joel. You have a question?
What was it? I was wondering if you get some of the worms into the soil with your plants in your garden when you're putting the worm compost made soil into the garden. Is that good or bad? Or should you not have the worms really in?
You don't really want to put the worms into your garden. They are surface feeder worms, are a little different from earthworms, and unless your garden has a lot of surface material like leaf litter, your worms aren't going to be very happy there. A lot of times they will die. So it's better to just use your compost itself into your garden. You don't really want to put the worms directly in your garden.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Joel. All right, so I did get a question from Heather. How often can you add compost to beds and soil? I will say the most important times to add compost to your soil is when you're planting out your plants. When you dig the hole, you put a little bit of compost in the hole. Throughout the growing season, you can put as needed, maybe every couple of weeks, maybe once a month. You can dress the top of your soil where your plants are with some of the compost. Also, you can add compost when your fruits and flowers are forming. That's completely fine too. Compost is relatively safe. I'm not saying dump a ton of compost into your garden. You play it by ear. You do a little bit at a time, just enough to cover your garden without overwhelming your garden. Because there is such thing as too much compost. You just need enough compost to include the nutrients that your plants need and the soil needs. You wouldn't want your entire bed to be completely compost, if that's a good example. Yes. All right. Anything in excess is, Elisa says, anything in excess isn't good. Save your desired worm food in the bucket and sprinkle bokashi to break down your bucket. Place a lid on the bucket and you can freeze for future use. My worms do well in my garden. It's all about balance. All right. Yeah, thank you. All right. Any other questions?
The last one again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it good to just gently hand till with like a pitchfork when you add the compost sometimes, once in a while, to work the compost down into the ground and aerate the soil a little, or is that negative for the soil matrix?
It's okay if you're doing it like in the beginning of the season before you plant out everything, But we at La Mesa Verde like to encourage a little less tilling, unless your soil is super hard. A little less tilling in your garden, because that actually preserves soil structure. You can use a fork to loosen it up, but in terms of doing deep digging, you don't want to do that as much. What I would recommend instead is using a cultivator. You know that little tool, the hand tool that has the 3 prongs that kind of go like this, where it's like a claw. You can use that just to incorporate the compost in the first top inch or 2 of your soil. That's going to be just as fine.
Oh yeah, just a little tiny.
Yeah, just a little bit. You just want to do it right on the surface.
On the surface soil.
Yeah.
So you just want the nutrients will just work their way down.
Yes, as you water it, the nutrients will go down into the soil and into the roots. So, let me see. Arlette asked, can I use worm from my garden soil into my compost pile? If you have an open compost pile, Arlette, where it's touching the ground, the worms will automatically go into your compost pile. That's fine. It's not. There's no harm with having those worms go into it. If you have like a tumbler, that's not going to be as good for garden worms, personally. Yeah, because earthworms are a little bit different from red wiggler worms. So you really want to do red wiggler worms if you're going to be doing it in a tumbler if it's off the ground. But if it's on the ground, you're going to get earthworms regardless. Okay, any other questions? Any other tips for anyone who's actually kept worms themselves? Okay. All right. Well, if any of you...
That's one. I was always wondering, I used to know these people that had a house up in the Santa Cruz Mountains with all the redwood soil. It was all redwood trees, and seemed like things grew really nice, and it was really nice soil. And it was always really, didn't pack down really bad. And I wondered if that redwood soil conditioner, is that good for soil around here and good for the worms and everything? Or is that too often nutrients are off balance?
Well, like mentioned before, Joel, during the fertilizer portion of the workshop, the forest compost or forest byproducts, they can give some nutrients. They're not super nutrient dense. It's more so for the fungi and bacteria. It will break up clay soil, especially in this area. But in terms of nutrients, it's not going to give as much.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's not really that rich.
It's not as rich. It's just rich in life.
Oh, it's good to kind of just bring it to life.
Yes, Mariana, I see your comment. We will be sending a copy of this presentation via email to you. Also a link to the video once we post it up on our YouTube page, so you can review everything and then go through the question and answers a little bit more. And also, we are a resource when it comes to asking questions after the workshop. So if you have questions about any gardening topics after any workshop, you can definitely ask me, Fernando, or Riley. Yeah, no problem, Marianne. All right, any other comments, any other questions? Oh, Moria, go ahead.
I wanted to comment on the thing about redwood trees or redwood bark or whatever as a fertilizer. So redwood trees make something in their bodies that is, it's either a hormone or it's something that's similar to a hormone that, hormone might be the wrong word because they're trees, but anyway, they make something that actually discourages other plants from growing, which makes a lot of sense if you think about what a redwood forest looks like. And some other trees do also, but I know for sure redwood trees make a compound that discourages other plants from growing. So I would not use redwood as a fertilizer because of that. And some other trees may also have similar properties, but I'm not as familiar with which ones.
Just to be specific, Moria, the other tree that I can think of that has growth retardant hormones or chemicals in it would be black walnut trees. those ones actually will discourage germination and discourage growth of other plants.
Yeah,
That's why when you see those specific walnut trees, nothing is growing below them, because obviously that chemical is being released when their leaves fall and their walnuts fall.
right,
So
which is also how it is in redwood forests. And I suspect actually that probably lots of trees have things like this. But anyway, for sure for redwoods. Thanks.
Thank you, Moria. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post one more survey specific to this gardening workshop. If you can take 10 minutes to actually fill this out for me, it'll give us a good idea of how useful this workshop was. So give me one moment. Let me get that link. I'm going to be posting it on the chat. All right. Oh, wait. No, wait, that's not the right one. I apologize. One second. Okay. All right. I'm going to post it in the chat right now. All right. We're at 11:42 right now. So at 11:47, we'll come back as a group to join the main room again to do the announcements. And then, yeah, we will finish up the workshop. So everyone go ahead and click the link that I posted. I'm going to wait 5 minutes and then we will join the main room. Yes, exactly, Lisa, the black walnut toxicity. That's why black walnuts are not very good for permaculture setups.
Just going other black walnuts. So.
Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you, Nicole.
I want to grow other redwood trees. That's a redwood. Only be good with other redwood.
All right, let me see. We're in composting workshop. All right, we have 23 responses so far. If you can see a little bit more, and then we'll close up soon.
Redwood pine nuts any good. That's it.
Heather, according to your question, I'm actually not completely sure about black walnuts being harmful to worms. I don't have an answer for that, but I can definitely follow up with you on that. All right, we have 34 responses. We're almost done. 3 more minutes. Thank you, Sudha. We have 2 more minutes left. Yes, Joel, did you have a question?
Oh, I just noticed something odd that I think redwood trees are also poisonous because they make houses out of redwood because also termites won't eat the redwood. And like cedar, it keeps bugs away. But also it also makes pine cones like other kinds of deciduous trees. I mean of of evergreen trees. And the squirrels do eat the pine cone seeds from the redwoods, I noticed. So they must not. So then it must be putting out something good for them.
It really just depends on the species. Oh, thank you, Lisa. Okay, one more minute, everyone. Thank you so much for your responses so far. We're going to join the main room in 1 minute. And also, we will be sending this survey out after the workshop in an email with the presentation and the video link. So just be prepared for that if you cannot fill it out right now. Thank you so much, everyone. You were an amazing group. You had a lot of good questions and a lot of good input. Feel like I even learned a lot today, so I really appreciate everyone's presence. I'm going to go ahead and end the breakout room right now and join the main room. That way we can continue on with the workshop. Oh, Marion. Yes, Marion, we'll make sure to send that to everyone, okay? Oh, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I really worked hard on this presentation this time. Hopefully my presentations are getting a little bit more interesting. All right, we're gonna go ahead and leave this room, okay?
Bien, yo uso todo mi composta de la cocina, todo lo sigo haciendo. También otra cosa que tengo que me ayuda mucho y pienso yo cada año es en mi jardín produce mucho el nettle, no sé si lo conocen, en español le dicen la ortiga.
Yeah.
So,
Sí, hablamos de eso.
Nettle. Sí, entonces yo cada vez, yo lo arranco todo y lo pongo en mis camas. Y ese estaba leyendo yo que es muy buen abono también para la tierra.
Gracias, María.
De nada, sí.
So le damos la bienvenida al grupo que habla inglés. So welcome everyone to the big party here. We were just talking about fertilizers, compost, and we are thinking to create a network of worm composters here. We're gonna have an army of worm composters here. And we have some members who have worms, so they're gonna share with us. And at least Carlos have worms, Noé have worms, I have worms. So we can share those things. And even a member asked if we can make a system for babysitter worms when you are out of the country or for vacation. So even in that level we get. That was so funny. Okay, everyone fill out the survey about the gardening and the food justice. I can see the names here. So for the Spanish one, I say for those who fill out the garden bed, they're gonna receive 2 more worms. They're gonna receive the double of worms. It's maybe a joke. Everyone who would like to receive, if they have the containers to have worms and they are interested, they can ask to La Mesa Verde members. So we have 49 response. So I think it's a good number. Gracias a todos. Carlos, Riley, and this is the moment for the announcement. I'm going to share my screen 1 second and we can close this wonderful event, okay? Give me 1 second. So this is the announcement in Spanish. So for Riley and Carlos, do you think I can share this in Spanish and then you share your screen in English? I need to hear you because I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
I only see a white screen, Fernando.
Oh.
I thought that was just me. Thank you for saying something.
Yeah.
What about now?
No, perfect.
Perfect.
Entonces, so I'm gonna share this in Spanish and then Carlos or Riley's gonna do this in English. Primero, tenemos instalaciones de jardín, todavía no terminamos, ya llevamos más del 70% de las camas instaladas. ¿Cuáles son las fechas? Martes 23 de marzo a las 2 de la tarde, miércoles 24 de marzo en la mañana, martes 30 de marzo en la mañana, martes 30 de marzo en la tarde, el miércoles 31 de marzo, fin de mes, a las 3 de la tarde, jueves 1 de abril y viernes 2 de abril, los 2 de la tarde. Quienes quieran participar, tengan tiempecito y quieran sumarse, pueden contactar a Carlos, a mí, pero específicamente Riley es la que está haciendo el seguimiento de eso. El 10 de abril va a ser la última instalación de camas de jardín. Vamos a instalar 12 camas de jardín en un día en 2 espacios comunitarios. Así que el sábado 10 de abril, si es que están interesados también en participar, desde las 9:30 de la mañana hasta las 1, vamos a estar instalando 12 camas de jardín. ¿Cuáles son los anuncios? El Tesoro y el IRS extendieron la fecha límite de presentación y pago de los impuestos hasta el 17 de mayo. Así que quienes estaban un poco atrasados con ese proceso, el gobierno y la institución que regula los impuestos extendió el plazo hasta el 17 de mayo. Segundo anuncio, la distribución de plantas de primavera, perdón, va a ser el 24 de abril. A quienes recibieron nuestro calendario y dice 17 de abril, dice otra fecha, por favor corríjanla, porque la distribución de plantas va a ser el sábado 24 de abril y cada familia va a recibir un horario para recoger sus plantitas. Tercero, el encuentro de solidaridad del Sagrado Corazón va a ser el sábado 1 de mayo. Ese es un encuentro virtual que van a ser invitados todas y todos, en donde vamos a aprender, celebrar y sobre todo vamos a ver qué oportunidades existen para involucrarse en temas de justicia migratoria, económica, medioambiental en el Sagrado Corazón. Y el último es que el próximo taller que tenemos acá en la Mesa Verde va a ser en mayo, el 15 de mayo, y vamos a estar hablando sobre el manejo integrado de plagas, ¿ya? Así que todas y todos quedan al día con esto. Cuando mandemos el email con la información, vamos a destacar estos anuncios y también las fechas para ser voluntario construyendo camas, ¿ok? Ahora voy a dejar a Carlos y Riley para que puedan hacer esto en inglés.
Okay.
So can you share your screen, Carla?
Yeah. O'Reilly, if you want to do the volunteer stuff, I can do the other announcements.
Cool.
1 second.
Okay. So I wish I had real numbers to update you all on the garden bed installations, but they're going great. We are definitely more than halfway done, which is really exciting. I first of all want to say thank you to everyone who has been involved so far, whether that was just being outside and working with us while you were receiving your own garden bed installation or coming to volunteer for another one. We have put in so many hours and so many shovels full of dirt into this. So, but it's not over yet. So these are the dates for the next couple of weeks. Everyone who has volunteered so far or expressed interest in volunteering has probably already received these dates at least 1 or 2 weeks out. And you will be receiving more, but this is mostly to encourage anyone who hasn't been involved yet to reach out if you want to get your hands dirty and help install a garden bed. Please let me know. And I would love to have you for these last couple of weeks of installations.
And just to add on to what Riley is saying, like it was mentioned before when you joined the program in the reminder email for the workshop for today, members are required to do 15 hours of volunteer work with the program for this programming year in order to graduate for the first year curriculum and receive your plants. So if you are a first year member and you have not asked Riley about volunteer opportunities yet, now is a really good time. This is a really easy way of fulfilling your hours. Also, there are other ways to volunteer as well. So if you are interested in getting that information or even just getting an update on the amount of hours that you've done so far, please contact Riley at her phone number. You can call or text or email her as well.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so just some important community announcements. So it's been announced recently that the Treasury and IRS are extending the filing and the payment deadline to March 17th of this year. So they moved it back a little bit more to give time for tax preparation and for appointments, especially since we're still in the COVID pandemic. Other than that, spring planting distribution has been changed from the previous week to April 24th instead. It's set on your calendar, I think April 19th or something, but now it's going to be on April 24th. So just make sure you mark that on your calendar. You will all be contacted soon with the date, the time of your appointment. It's going to be a drive-through event. So that's when you will be picking up your information on how to plant your plants themselves, and seeds. So that's one of our bigger events. If you want to volunteer to help distribute plants or organize plants prior to the event, please contact Riley and we can arrange for you to volunteer for either of those days. Okay, Solidarity Summit, which is a big event that we've been doing annually with Sacred Heart, is coming up on May 1st. We'd like to encourage our members to join us for Solidarity Summit. Basically a bunch of very relevant workshops, different topics are available, but it's free, it's going to be online, and we encourage you as our members to join it. So if you're interested in attending Solidarity Summit, please contact us and we'll make sure to register you for the event. Also, the next workshop after Planting Distribution Day in April is going to be on May 15th, which is going to be specifically on integrated pest management. You're going to be learning a lot about how there is a system to approach dealing with pests in your garden and different ways you can prevent or manage pests before resulting into chemical pesticides. So that's a really important workshop, especially if you're starting out and you're not sure how to treat certain problems in your garden, especially when it comes to pests. It's going to be an amazing workshop. Hopefully we'll have a speaker for that one this time around again, like last year, but that's our next gardening workshop. So there's a lot coming up this coming month, even the month after that. So be prepared, everyone. We will keep you updated via email, okay? Thank you.
So can you stop sharing your screen, please? So, ¿alguien más tiene algún anuncio comunitario, algún evento que quiera compartir? Anyone have any announcement they would like to share right now? This is the moment. You can unmute yourself and we can hear you. We just have 2 more minutes for them.
Thank you so much, LMV staff and like all the first years and second years. Thank you so much.
No problem, Sudha.
I just have something that I just thought of. I don't know if this is even possible, but I know a lot of people have different ideas about like the compost and all that, what they use. And so I was thinking right now someone shared that they use like the food for rabbits. So if it is possible, is there any way that maybe if the people that already have experience with that want to share maybe like pictures or like videos of what they do or what they use? And then that way we that were new and we can see like, oh, this is doable for me or that's doable for me and kind of just give it a try. I don't know if that's even a possibility, but.
Mm-hmm. So Vanessa, I just want to interject real quick. In terms of using rabbit food, definitely you can use it, but a lot of times there's a lot of different minerals and other things added to conventional rabbit pellets that you may not want in your garden. The main pellets that you want to use is alfalfa pellets, specifically for gardening, and a lot of feed stores will sell it specifically just alfalfa pellets. That's just alfalfa, nothing else added into it. So that's just something just for you to consider. I don't want there to be any misinterpretation of that, but definitely I have used alfalfa pellets before in my garden with very good results. It's usually recommended with a lot of our mentors to use that as an alternative fertilizer. So that is definitely something we can talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, and that was something Maria Mendez shared about alfalfa pellets. So thank you, Vanessa. And yes, we have the Facebook group. So if you have a good experience in your garden, you can take a picture and make a post through social media. Right now, we can have this experience in sharing this knowledge. So I encourage you to try that. Okay, everyone, if we don't have any other announcement at 12 p.m. o'clock, we can finish this workshop, this event. It was a really good time. And yes, we will create this playlist of your favorite song in every single event. So yes, thank you for sharing your song. We create a really good playlist in Spotify of La Mesa Verde. Gracias a todos quienes vinieron a las 12:01. Vamos a terminar este evento. Fue muy divertido, fue muy entretenido y fue muy educativo compartir con ustedes, escuchar de ustedes sus historias, sus conocimientos y experiencias. So, agradecido totalmente a ustedes por estar aquí hoy día y vamos a estar en contacto porque el próximo evento es la distribución de plantas. ¿Ya? Un abrazo grande y estamos en contacto. Hasta luego.
We have one announcement from Sabrina in the chat, Fernando. Would you be able to read that out?
Can you read that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's getting pushed up because everyone's commenting. 1 second. Okay, Sabrina says, if anyone is in the process of becoming a U.S. citizen, their school is offering free citizen classes. So if you're interested, please call at 408-522-2700. And we will send this information via email to everyone too in our follow-up email after this workshop. So we'll make sure everyone has access to that. Thank you. That's a great resource.
Ya, yo puedo traducirlo. Si alguien está en proceso para convertirse en ciudadano norteamericano, en la escuela de Sabrina Irving están ofreciendo clases gratis de ciudadanía. Y si están interesados, pueden llamar al 408-522-2700. Y vamos a compartir esta información también en el correo electrónico que vamos a enviar para todos y todas. Thank you very much, everyone.
Gracias.
De nada, nos
Thank
vemos.
you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good to see you all.
Take care.
Ok, que pase un excelente fin de semana.
You too. Gracias, que estén bien.
Llámame,
Gracias.
Fernando, por favor.
Bye. Good job, everyone.
Hasta luego.
Thank you.
Hasta luego.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Adiós.
Alrighty.
Close my eyes, I open my heart, I'll take a deep breath, let the healing start.
Bye, everyone. We will say goodbye with this beautiful song.
Gracias, Fernando.
Nos vemos, que estés bien.
Gracias,
Melucia.
igual, buen día.
Take care.
It's calling.
Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Spirit rise up, rise in me.
You can make it.
I let in my soul, I clear my mind. I'm here and now, in present time. I feel the power of 1,000 suns, lighting up the dark. Oh, we rise as one. Oh, rise, rise, spirit, rise up, rise in me.
Okay. All right, everyone, we're going to close out the room, okay? So everyone have a good afternoon. Enjoy yourselves, relax a little. And we hope to talk to all of you soon, okay? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.
Oh, okay, there you go. Let me check with Neela real quick. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
Anyone is recording this?
Oh, I think you are.
I think it's Carlo.
Then don't say anything again.
I am on the record, so.
Yeah. All right, that went well though.
Huh?
That went well.
Yes. So I need to stop this song. Can you hear the song? Or?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay, so I stopped sharing my screen. Ah, Diosito. It take me a lot of time to put this in Facebook.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did it work? I forgot.
Yeah.
To check. Okay, good.
It did work, but I think I never get into put this in the fan page, just in our profile.
Got it.
So how was the food justice part in the English group?
It went well. There was a good amount of conversation. People were sharing resources, so that was good.
I need to use the restroom. 1 second.
Okay.
Hello, hello.
I think you're still recording on your computer if you could.
Oh, okay. Thank you.